Jasmine Warren, 12, watches her father Elijah transform from quiet businessman to unstoppable force as airline stocks plummet on Wall Street screens. "Daddy broke the airline that broke my glasses," she whispers to her mother Teresa, clutching the snapped frames that changed everything. Before we dive into this shocking story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to follow more incredible stories of justice served. Now, let's see how a pair of broken glasses led to a billion-dollar corporation crumbling to its knees. The Warren family had been looking forward to this vacation for months. Elijah Warren, a successful tech entrepreneur with a brilliant mind for innovation, had promised his family a well-deserved break after a year of hard work. His wife Teresa, one of the most respected pediatric surgeons at Memorial Hospital, had finally managed to coordinate her schedule for a full week off. But nobody was more excited than 12-year-old Jasmine, their gifted daughter who had just received national recognition for her science project on renewable energy. "Did you remember to pack your backup glasses, Jazz?" Teresa asked as they navigated through the busy terminal of Atlanta International Airport. "Mom, I never need my backup glasses," Jasmine replied, adjusting her stylish purple frames that complemented her dark skin and brought out the amber flecks in her brown eyes. These weren't just any glasses, they were special prescription lenses that helped manage her progressive myopia, custom-made and expensive. Elijah smiled at his daughter's confidence. At 42, he had built his tech company from the ground up, overcoming every obstacle the business world had thrown at a black entrepreneur. He had taught Jasmine to carry herself with the same unwavering confidence. First-class passengers for SkyNation Airlines Flight 372 to San Francisco may now board, the announcement came over the speakers. The Warrens approached the gate, boarding passes and IDs ready. The gate agent smiled politely, scanned their tickets, and wished them a pleasant flight. It was when they stepped onto the aircraft that the atmosphere changed. Flight attendant Heather Simpson was greeting passengers at the entrance. Her smile faltered visibly when the Warren family appeared. She glanced at their first-class boarding passes with narrowed eyes. "Are you sure you're in first class?" she asked, despite having just seen their boarding passes. "Yes, seats 2A through 2C, Elijah replied calmly, having experienced this type of questioning before. Heather's lips tightened. "I'll need to see those boarding passes again." Teresa exchanged a glance with Elijah as they once again presented their tickets. Jasmine noticed the tension but remained quiet. "Very well," Heather finally said, gesturing them through with considerably less warmth than she had shown to the white passengers who had boarded before them. As they settled into their spacious first-class seats, Jasmine whispered, "Dad, why did she ask to see our tickets twice?" Elijah patted her hand. "Some people have trouble believing we belong in certain spaces, sweetheart. That's their problem, not ours." Throughout the first hour of the flight, the Warrens couldn't help but notice the disparity in service. Heather was attentive and cheerful with the white passengers, engaging in friendly conversation and promptly addressing their needs. When serving the Warrens, her interactions were minimal, her smile forced, and her responses curt. When drink service began, Heather served everyone else in first class before approaching the Warrens. "What would you like?" she asked flatly. "Cranberry juice, please," Jasmine said politely. Heather practically thrust the drink at her, causing some to spill on Jasmine's book. "Oh!" Jasmine exclaimed, quickly lifting her novel to prevent further damage. "You should be more careful," Heather said, not apologizing for the spill she had caused. Teresa dabbed at the book with a napkin, her doctor's composure preventing her from making a scene, but Elijah noticed her clenched jaw. When meal service began, Jasmine discovered her tray table was stuck. "Excuse me," she called politely to Heather who was passing by. "My tray table won't come down." Heather sighed audibly and came over. "It's just stuck. You need to press the button," she said condescendingly. "I did press it," Jasmine replied. "It still won't move." With visible irritation, Heather reached over and yanked at the tray table. In doing so, she knocked against Jasmine's glasses. Before anyone could react, she grabbed them. "Let me move these out of the way," she said, handling them roughly. "Please be careful," Jasmine started to say. "Those are prescription," the crack was audible. In Heather's hands, the frames snapped in half, the left temple piece breaking clean off. Jasmine gasped. The cabin seemed to freeze. "Oh," Heather said flatly, handing the broken pieces back to a shocked Jasmine. "They're just glasses." "Just glasses?" Teresa echoed incredulously. "Those are her prescription lenses." "It was an accident," Heather replied dismissively. "You can tape them together until you land." Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes as she held the broken pieces. Without her glasses, the world was a blur beyond 3 feet. Her vision had been deteriorating over the past year, and these specially prescribed lenses were her lifeline. "My daughter needs those glasses to see," Elijah said, his voice controlled but cold. "This was not an accident, it was negligence." "Sir, I said I'm sorry," Heather replied, though she hadn't actually apologized. "What more do you want?" "Your full name and employee ID," Elijah stated firmly, taking out his phone to document the incident. "And I'll need to speak with the lead flight attendant immediately." "There's no need to escalate this," Heather said, suddenly nervous. "Accidents happen." "This was no accident," Elijah insisted, his calm demeanor belying his anger. "And I will be escalating this. Now, your name and ID, please." For the remainder of the 5-hour flight, Jasmine sat quietly, unable to read, watch movies, or see clearly. Teresa did her best to comfort her daughter, while Elijah meticulously documented everything, including photographs of the broken glasses and witness statements from sympathetic passengers nearby who had seen the entire incident. What Heather Simpson didn't realize as Flight 372 soared toward San Francisco was that she hadn't just broken a pair of glasses. She had ignited a fire in a man who had spent his entire life overcoming obstacles, a man who had the resources, connections, and determination to hold an entire corporation accountable for its actions. The Warren family emerged from San Francisco International Airport into the bright California sunshine, which would have been beautiful if Jasmine could see it clearly. Squinting without her glasses, she clung to her mother's arm for guidance through the unfamiliar environment. "We'll get you new glasses first thing," Teresa promised, guiding her daughter toward the rental car area. Elijah was on his phone immediately, having already looked up SkyNation's customer service number before they had even deplaned. "Yes, I'd like to report an incident that occurred on Flight 372 from Atlanta," he began, his voice calm but resolute. What followed was an exercise in frustration. The initial customer service representative transferred him to customer relations, who then passed him to in-flight services, who suggested he speak with baggage claims, despite the issue having nothing to do with luggage. "This is regarding a flight attendant who deliberately broke my daughter's prescription glasses," Elijah explained for the 4th time, his patience wearing thin. "I understand, sir, and I apologize for the inconvenience," the latest representative responded with the practiced insincerity of someone reading from a script. "We can offer you a one-time courtesy voucher of $100 toward a future flight." $100? Elijah repeated incredulously. "My daughter's prescription glasses cost $750, not to mention she spent 5 hours unable to see properly, and you're offering me a voucher?" "It's our standard compensation for items damaged during flight, sir." "This wasn't an item damaged during turbulence. This was a flight attendant deliberately mishandling my daughter's medical device. Glasses aren't classified as medical devices under our policy, sir." Elijah pinched the bridge of his nose. "I need to speak to a supervisor." 3 supervisors later, the story hadn't changed. Each one expressed rehearsed regret but insisted that the incident was unfortunate but not discriminatory. When Elijah pointed out that the flight attendant had treated white passengers with courtesy while showing clear disdain for his family, the supervisor suggested he was reading into things. Meanwhile, Teresa had taken Jasmine to an emergency optometrist appointment. The cost for Rush replacement glasses came to $750, and worse, the examination revealed that Jasmine's prescription had changed significantly in the 6 months since her last checkup. Her myopia was progressing faster than anticipated. The stress of the incident could have temporarily affected her vision readings, the optometrist explained gently. I'd like to see her again in a few weeks to confirm. That evening in their hotel suite, Elijah received a call from Vernon Hamilton, SkyNation's corporate spokesperson, who had apparently been alerted that a situation might generate negative publicity. Mr. Warren, I want to personally assure you that SkyNation takes customer satisfaction very seriously, Hamilton began smoothly. Does SkyNation take racism seriously? Elijah countered. There was a pause. We categorically deny any suggestion of racial discrimination by our staff. SkyNation is committed to diversity and inclusion. Then how do you explain a flight attendant treating my family differently than white passengers, questioning our right to be in first class, and then deliberately breaking my daughter's glasses? Mr. Warren, I think you're mischaracterizing what was clearly an accident. Our flight attendant has an exemplary record, and I have witness statements from other passengers confirming the disparate treatment, Elijah interrupted. And the accident occurred after she had already shown clear bias. We're prepared to increase our goodwill offer to a $300 flight voucher, Hamilton replied, ignoring Elijah's points. Elijah laughed without humor. Mr. Hamilton, I don't think you understand. I'm not looking for a voucher. I'm looking for accountability, a formal apology to my daughter, disciplinary action for the flight attendant, and compensation for the replacement glasses. I'm afraid those demands are excessive for what amounts to an unfortunate accident. The conversation ended in a stalemate, with Hamilton suggesting that Elijah should reflect on whether pursuing this further is worth his time. Later that evening, as the family tried to enjoy dinner at a waterfront restaurant, Jasmine overheard a nearby table discussing a social media post about the incident. Someone had apparently witnessed the confrontation and shared it online with the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack. Dad, Jasmine said quietly, people are talking about us. Elijah checked his phone and found that the post had already been shared thousands of times. Comments ranged from supportive outrage to dismissive claims that the family was overreacting or seeking attention. Are we making too big a deal about this? Jasmine asked, looking vulnerable in her temporary glasses, which didn't fit properly and kept sliding down her nose. Teresa took her daughter's hand. Standing up against unfair treatment is never making too big a deal, honey. Elijah nodded, his resolve hardening as he scrolled through the comments and saw how many people shared similar experiences on SkyNation and other airlines. This isn't just about your glasses anymore, Jazz, he said softly. This is about a pattern of behavior that needs to change. He looked at his wife and daughter, the two most important people in his world. And I think we might be in a position to change it. What SkyNation didn't realize was that they hadn't just broken the glasses of any 12-year-old girl. They had broken the glasses of the daughter of a man who had the connections, resources, and determination to hold them accountable on a scale they couldn't imagine. Vernon Hamilton's dismissive response had just sealed the airline's fate, though it would be weeks before they understood the magnitude of their miscalculation. As Jasmine went to bed that night, still squinting despite her temporary glasses, Elijah made a promise to himself. This would not be swept under the rug. This would not be forgotten. This would become a lesson that corporations across America would remember for years to come. The Warren family vacation continued, but in the background, Elijah began making calls to people in his network, people with influence, people with power, people who understood what it meant to fight against systemic discrimination. The wheels were in motion, and SkyNation's dismissive response had just set them on a collision course with a force they couldn't possibly have anticipated. Ever wondered what happens when corporations underestimate the power of a determined parent? Comment number 1 if you believe companies should be held accountable for racial discrimination, or number 2 if you think people are too quick to play the race card. Hit like and subscribe to follow this story of corporate accountability to its shocking conclusion. Now, what would you do if you were in Elijah's shoes? Let's see how he transformed from concerned father to the architect of an airline's downfall. 3 days into what should have been a relaxing family vacation, Elijah Warren sat in the hotel suite's living room, surrounded by laptops and tablets, while Teresa took Jasmine to Fisherman's Wharf to see the sea lions. He'd insisted they try to enjoy California despite the unfolding situation. Meanwhile, he was laying groundwork for something much bigger than SkyNation could anticipate. What Vernon Hamilton and the SkyNation executives didn't know, what they hadn't bothered to research before dismissing his complaints, was that Elijah Warren wasn't just any tech entrepreneur. He was the founder and CEO of NextGen Ventures, one of the most successful black-owned venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, with over $2 billion in managed assets and stakes in dozens of influential tech companies. Elijah had spent his career helping underfunded minority founders build successful companies, and in the process, he developed an extensive network of powerful allies who understood the importance of fighting systemic discrimination. His first call was to Brandon Washington, a civil rights attorney who had successfully represented victims of discrimination against major corporations, including airlines. "They offered you a voucher?" Brandon chuckled darkly when Elijah explained the situation. "Classic deflection tactic. They're hoping you'll go away quietly." "They picked the wrong family to dismiss," Elijah replied. "I've been tracking SkyNation for years," Brandon revealed. "There's a pattern here. I've received at least 20 complaints about discriminatory treatment in first class in the past 2 years alone, but most people can't afford to take on a corporation of that size." "Money isn't an issue here," Elijah assured him. "What I need is strategy." His next call was to Olivia Chen, a PR specialist known for her expertise in crisis management and corporate accountability campaigns. "We need to approach this systematically," Olivia advised. "SkyNation is vulnerable right now. Their customer satisfaction ratings have been declining, and they're in the middle of negotiating new routes with the Department of Transportation. The last thing they need is a public relations nightmare involving discrimination against a child." Elijah nodded, taking notes. "I want to be clear, this isn't about revenge. This is about accountability and changing behavior." "Then we need to show a pattern," Olivia explained. "Your daughter's incident alone might be dismissed as isolated, but if we can demonstrate that this is part of a larger issue within the company's culture, we can force meaningful change." Over the next 48 hours, Elijah's team quietly conducted research. What they uncovered was disturbing: dozens of complaints about discriminatory treatment on SkyNation, many of which had been settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. More significantly, they obtained a leaked internal memo from a former SkyNation employee that outlined passenger profile indicators for flight attendants to identify potential service priority passengers, coded language that essentially encouraged preferential treatment for wealthy-appearing white passengers. Elijah also reached out to his network of black business leaders, including CEOs, entertainers, athletes, and influencers who had experienced similar treatment on SkyNation. Many were eager to join what was quickly becoming a movement. "We're forming a coalition," he explained to Maya Johnson, the CEO of a major cosmetics company and a frequent first-class traveler. "SkyNation needs to understand that their actions have consequences. I've experienced their special treatment too many times to count," Maya replied. "Count me in. I can redirect our corporate travel contracts elsewhere with one phone call." By the end of the week, Elijah had assembled a formidable team. Brandon Washington would handle legal strategy, Olivia Chen would manage public relations, and a coalition of over 30 influential black business leaders had committed to supporting the campaign. When Jasmine and Teresa returned to the hotel room that evening, they found Elijah surrounded by papers, his expression more determined than they'd ever seen. "Daddy, are you still working on the glasses thing?" Jasmine asked, sitting beside him. "Can't we just forget about it? I have new glasses now." Elijah turned to his daughter, seeing beyond her new temporary frames to the hurt in her eyes. He knew that despite her brave front, the incident had affected her deeply. "Jazz, remember when you were 8 and that boy at school kept taking your lunch?" he asked gently. Jasmine nodded. "And remember what I told you then? That if we don't stand up to bullies, they keep bullying," she recited. Exactly. SkyNation is a bully that's been getting away with treating people unfairly because of the color of their skin. If we don't stand up to them, they'll keep doing it to other families. "But it's a big company," Jasmine said, her voice small. "How can we make them change?" Elijah smiled. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the right person in the right position can create change that seems impossible. And we're not alone in this fight." Teresa sat down on Jasmine's other side, putting an arm around her daughter. "Your father has been working on something important. This isn't just about your glasses anymore. It's about making sure companies know they can't treat people differently based on race." Jasmine thought about this for a moment. "Like how Dr. King fought for equality?" "Exactly like that," Elijah nodded. "But our tools are different. Dr. King had marches and speeches. We have legal action, media pressure, and economic consequences. What's the plan?" Teresa asked, though the determined look in her husband's eyes told her he had already mapped out every step. "First, we share Jasmine's story. Then, we reveal the pattern. Finally, we present SkyNation with a choice, meaningful change or significant consequences." What Elijah didn't tell them was just how significant those consequences could be. He had already spoken with investors who collectively controlled nearly 15% of SkyNation's stock. He had connections with corporate travel departments that accounted for millions in annual revenue for the airline. And he had media contacts ready to amplify the story nationwide. The next morning, as the Warren family prepared to enjoy their last day in San Francisco before returning home, Elijah received a call from SkyNation's corporate office. "Mr. Warren, this is Patricia Alvarez from SkyNation's executive relations team. We've reviewed your complaint and would like to offer you a full refund of your tickets and a $1,000 travel voucher as a gesture of goodwill." Elijah laughed softly. "Ms. Alvarez, I appreciate the call, but I think you misunderstand the situation. This isn't about money. This is about accountability. We take these matters very seriously, Mr. Warren, and—" "If you took them seriously," Elijah interrupted, "you would have addressed the underlying issues of racial bias in your company rather than trying to buy my silence. I'll be in touch through my attorney." As he hung up, Jasmine looked at him with newfound admiration. "Are we really going to change an entire airline, Dad?" Elijah nodded, his expression resolute. "We're going to try, sweetheart. And in the process, we might just change how every corporation in America thinks about discrimination." What SkyNation failed to realize was that they hadn't just broken the glasses of an ordinary black girl. They had broken the glasses of the daughter of a man who had spent his entire life breaking barriers, building coalitions, and creating change. A man who now had the resources, connections, and moral clarity to hold them accountable on a scale they couldn't begin to imagine. The stage was set. The players were in position. And SkyNation was about to learn a very expensive lesson about the cost of discrimination in modern America. The video opened with Jasmine Warren sitting in her bedroom, surrounded by science fair trophies and books. Her new glasses, similar to the purple ones that had been broken but not quite the same, sat slightly askew on her face. "My name is Jasmine Warren. I'm 12 years old, and this is what happened when my family and I flew on SkyNation Airlines last week," she began, her voice steady despite her evident nervousness. Over the next 3 minutes, Jasmine recounted the incident in detail, the flight attendants' initial coldness, the different treatment they received compared to white passengers, and the moment when Heather Simpson snapped her glasses in half and dismissed it as, just glasses. "Those weren't just glasses to me," Jasmine explained. "Without them, I can't see the board at school. I can't read my books. I can't see the faces of people I love clearly." She paused, looking directly into the camera. And I couldn't help wondering, would she have been so careless with someone else's glasses? Someone who looked different from me. The video, posted with the hashtag #GlassesGate, accumulated over 1 million views within 24 hours. It was shared by celebrities, reposted by civil rights organizations, and picked up by news outlets across the country. The next day, Elijah appeared on American Morning with respected journalist Marcus Reynolds, a 15-minute segment that would normally cost a fortune in public relations fees. "Mr. Warren, some might say this was just an unfortunate accident," Marcus began. "Why do you believe there was a racial component to this incident?" "The broken glasses were the culmination, not the beginning," Elijah explained calmly. "From the moment we boarded, the flight attendant questioned our presence in first class, despite seeing our boarding passes. She provided attentive service to white passengers while treating us with visible disdain. Multiple witnesses have confirmed this pattern. The glasses were broken after a series of microaggressions that made it clear we were being treated differently because of our race. SkyNation has issued a statement calling this an isolated incident and offering compensation," Marcus noted. "If it were truly isolated, I might have accepted their offer," Elijah replied. "But our research has uncovered dozens of similar complaints from black passengers on SkyNation flights. This isn't about one flight attendant or one broken pair of glasses. This is about a corporate culture that tolerates, perhaps even encourages, discriminatory treatment." SkyNation's initial response came via a terse press release. SkyNation Airlines is committed to providing excellent service to all passengers regardless of race, gender, or background. While we regret the incident involving the Warren family, we categorically deny any allegations of systematic discrimination. We have offered the family appropriate compensation and consider the matter resolved. This dismissive statement only fueled the growing outrage. #GlassesGate continued trending, joined by #BoycottSkyNation and #FlyingWhileBlack. Former SkyNation passengers began sharing their own experiences of discrimination, creating a damning chorus of testimonials that could not be easily dismissed as isolated incidents. Behind the scenes, competing airlines quietly supported the campaign, seeing an opportunity to gain market share. Several reached out to Elijah's team with offers of support and information about SkyNation's internal practices. Celebrity endorsements poured in. Basketball star DeAndre Wilson posted a video recounting his own experience being questioned in first class despite being a frequent flyer with over 1 million miles. Oscar-winning actress Gabrielle Pierce announced she would no longer use SkyNation for her production company's travel needs. Grammy-winning artist Julian Cross released a song called "First Class, While Black" that rocketed to the top of streaming charts. 7 days into the campaign, SkyNation CEO Richard Winters appeared on national television to address the growing crisis. With practiced concern, he expressed regret for the unfortunate incident, but firmly denied any pattern of discrimination. SkyNation serves millions of passengers of all backgrounds every year, he insisted. "We do not discriminate, period. This situation has been blown entirely out of proportion, and we believe it's being exploited for publicity and financial gain." It was precisely the wrong response, and Olivia Chen knew it immediately. "He just poured gasoline on the fire," she told Elijah during their daily strategy call. Accusing a 12-year-old girl of exploiting the situation for publicity? The public will crucify him. She was right. Within hours, the backlash against Winters' statement was severe. Even business publications normally sympathetic to corporate positions criticized his tone-deaf response. Then came the bombshell that turned #GlassesGate from a social media trend into a full-blown crisis for SkyNation. Someone anonymously uploaded a video to a popular social media platform showing Heather Simpson, the same flight attendant who had broken Jasmine's glasses, in a separate incident 6 months earlier. In the video, she could be clearly seen telling a black passenger that his upgrade to first class must be a computer error and suggesting he return to his assigned seat in economy, despite his boarding pass clearly showing a first-class seat assignment. The video ended with Simpson calling a white male flight attendant to handle the situation, while rolling her eyes at nearby white passengers as if sharing a private joke. SkyNation stock, which had been dipping slightly since the beginning of the campaign, dropped 3% in a single day following the video's release. Financial analysts began asking questions about the potential impact of the controversy on the airline's bottom line. At Jasmine's school, her classmates had rallied around her. Inspired by her courage in speaking out, they organized a Broken Glasses Day, where students wore paper glasses with one side deliberately broken to show solidarity. The school principal, Dr. Hayes, invited Jasmine to speak at an assembly about standing up against injustice. "I was scared to talk about what happened," Jasmine admitted to her peers. "But my dad always says that change doesn't come from being comfortable. It comes from being brave enough to say when something isn't right." The image of Jasmine speaking to her classmates, all wearing broken paper glasses, went viral, further cementing public support for the Warren family's cause. Teresa, initially reluctant about the public attention, found herself becoming an important voice in the campaign. As a pediatric surgeon, she spoke eloquently about the medical implications of Jasmine being without proper prescription glasses for 5 hours. This wasn't just about comfort or convenience, she explained during a podcast interview. "For someone with Jasmine's level of myopia, being without corrective lenses causes eye strain, headaches, and can even contribute to the worsening of her condition. To dismiss her medical needs as just glasses shows a fundamental lack of care and understanding." As the second week of the campaign began, SkyNation's stock had dropped by 5%. Corporate travel departments were quietly rerouting flights to competitor airlines. Social media sentiment analysis showed that positive mentions of SkyNation had plummeted by 63%. The airline that had dismissed a broken pair of glasses as insignificant was beginning to realize that the true cost of their dismissive attitude might be measured not in hundreds of dollars, but in millions. SkyNation's boardroom buzzed with tension as CEO Richard Winters paced at the head of the long mahogany table. The stock price ticker on the wall showed another 2% drop since market opening. "This needs to end now," Winters snapped, turning to face the worried executives. "I want everything we have on Elijah Warren. There must be something we can use." The airline had hired Victoria Blackwell, founder of Blackwell Crisis Management, known in corporate circles as the Fixer. With her sleek bob and perpetual expression of calculated assessment, she was notorious for her ruthless approach to reputation management. "Mr. Warren is unfortunately quite clean," Victoria reported, scrolling through her tablet. "Successful entrepreneur, philanthropist, sits on multiple charity boards. His wife is a respected pediatric surgeon who's pioneered several techniques for correcting congenital eye defects, ironically enough. Everyone has skeletons," Winters insisted. "Dig deeper." Victoria nodded. "We're already on it. We've also prepared a counternarrative suggesting that Mr. Warren is using this incident to extort the airline and possibly position for a hostile takeover, given his investment connections." Within 24 hours, articles began appearing on conservative news sites questioning Elijah's motives. "Billionaire uses daughter's broken glasses to target airline," read one headline. "Warren's history of aggressive business tactics raises questions about #GlassesGate campaign," claimed another. Meanwhile, Elijah began receiving threatening messages. Some were merely insulting, calling him an opportunist or worse. Others were more sinister, with explicit threats against him and his family. "We need to hire security," Teresa insisted after someone posted their home address in an online forum. "This is getting dangerous." Elijah agreed, contracting a private security firm to protect their home and provide bodyguards for Teresa and Jasmine. It was an unfortunate but necessary precaution. SkyNation's counterattack didn't stop with media manipulation. They began pressuring their employees to sign statements confirming the company's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Those who refused found themselves subject to increased scrutiny or assigned to less desirable routes. However, this pressure backfired spectacularly when several employees, disgusted by the company's tactics, became anonymous whistleblowers. They began leaking internal communications to Brandon Washington, Elijah's attorney. One such leak was particularly damaging, an email chain between mid-level managers discussing passenger profiling for first-class service. The emails included explicit instructions to flight attendants to provide enhanced attention to passengers who reflect our premium brand image, with attached examples that were exclusively white executives. Another leak revealed that SkyNation had received 27 formal complaints about racial discrimination in first class over the past year alone, all of which had been classified as customer satisfaction issues, rather than potential civil rights violations. Brandon Washington compiled these materials for potential legal action, while Olivia Chen strategically released certain non-privileged documents to selected journalists. The narrative was shifting from one incident involving a young girl's glasses to a systematic pattern of discrimination institutionalized within SkyNation's corporate culture. Major corporate sponsors began to distance themselves from the airline. Lexington Financial Group, which had exclusively used SkyNation for their executive travel for 15 years, announced they were reviewing their travel partnerships. Global Tech Industries, another significant corporate client, publicly stated they were committed to working with vendors who share our values of inclusion and respect. As pressure mounted, SkyNation board members began reaching out to Elijah privately, sensing that Winter's aggressive approach was exacerbating the situation. "This has gone too far," said Jonathan Pierce, a senior board member, during a confidential call. "We want to resolve this situation without further damage to all parties involved." "I'm not interested in damaging SkyNation," Elijah replied calmly. "I'm interested in transforming it. This isn't about punishment, it's about change." He outlined his requirements: a comprehensive overhaul of SkyNation's training programs, independent monitoring of customer service practices, a significant donation to organizations promoting transportation equity, and the termination of employees involved in discriminatory practices, starting with Heather Simpson. Pierce promised to take these demands to the board, but Winters remained adamant in his refusal to admit any wrongdoing or agree to substantial changes. Giving in to these demands would be admitting guilt, he argued during an emergency board meeting. It would open us up to lawsuits from every passenger who ever felt slighted. What Winters failed to understand was that the landscape had already shifted. This wasn't just about legal liability anymore, it was about public perception and consumer confidence. SkyNation stock had now dropped 12% since the beginning of the campaign, and major institutional investors were expressing concern. The airline's desperate attempts at damage control continued. They hastily announced a one-day diversity training program for all customer-facing staff, which was immediately criticized as insufficient and performative. They released a new advertising campaign highlighting their diverse workforce, which was quickly mocked on social media as diversity washing. Throughout this corporate battle, Jasmine remained at the center of the story. Unlike her father, who was characterized by some as a powerful businessman with an agenda, Jasmine was seen for what she was, a bright young girl who had been hurt and humiliated because of her race. When conservative commentator William Hayes attempted to minimize the incident on his talk show, saying, "It's just a pair of glasses, for heaven's sake," the public backlash was immediate and fierce. Parents across the country, of all races, could imagine how they would feel if their child was treated similarly. As the third week of the campaign began, SkyNation's stock had dropped 17%. Corporate travel bookings were down 23% compared to the same period the previous year. The damage was no longer theoretical, it was reflected in real financial losses. But for Jasmine, the toll was becoming personal. At school, she overheard conversations about airline employees who might lose their jobs. The daughter of a SkyNation pilot was in her grade, and the girl had tearfully told classmates that her father was worried about his future. "Dad," Jasmine asked one evening, "what happens to all the people who work for SkyNation if the company gets in trouble?" "Not everyone there is like that flight attendant." Elijah sat beside his daughter, impressed by her compassion even in the midst of this battle. "You're right, Jazz. Most of the employees are good people just trying to do their jobs. That's why our goal isn't to destroy the airline. It's to make it better, for its passengers and its workers. But what if some people lose their jobs because of us? She persisted. Sometimes, Teresa interjected gently, systems need to change, and change can be painful. But allowing discrimination to continue hurts many more people in the long run. Jasmine nodded, though Elijah could see she was still troubled. It was a complexity that many adults failed to grasp, the balance between accountability and collateral damage, between justice and compassion. As the corporate battle intensified, with SkyNation becoming increasingly desperate in their counterattacks, Elijah remained focused on his ultimate goal, not to punish, but to transform. Not to destroy, but to rebuild. Not to divide, but to create a more equitable future. The battle lines were drawn, and the next phase would determine whether SkyNation could survive the storm, or whether a pair of broken glasses would indeed bring down a billion-dollar corporation. Have you ever witnessed justice unfold in real time? Comment number 1 if you've experienced discrimination while traveling, or number 2 if you believe corporations need stronger oversight against discriminatory practices. Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow more stories of everyday people taking on powerful systems. Now, let's head into the congressional hearing that would change the airline industry forever. Would you have the courage to testify like Jasmine did? The marble corridors of the Rayburn House office building echoed with footsteps as the Warren family made their way to room 2141. Elijah walked confidently in his perfectly tailored navy suit, while Teresa's white doctor's coat signaled her professional standing. Between them walked Jasmine, her new purple glasses now properly fitted, her braids tied back neatly with matching purple ribbons. "Remember, you only need to tell the truth," Teresa whispered to her daughter, squeezing her hand. "Just like we practiced." Inside, the House Transportation Committee hearing room was already packed. Journalists filled the press section, cameras positioned to capture every moment. Representatives from various airlines, transportation unions, and civil rights organizations occupied the public seating area. At the front, behind a curved dais, sat 15 members of Congress prepared to examine the issue titled on the agenda, Discrimination in Commercial Air Travel. Patterns, Practices, and Proposed Solutions. Chairman Representative Howard Fletcher gavelled the session to order. Today we examine troubling allegations of discriminatory practices in the airline industry. These concerns have been brought to national attention by the experience of the Warren family on SkyNation Airlines, but evidence suggests this may reflect broader patterns requiring legislative attention. In the witness chairs sat Elijah and Jasmine Warren, Brandon Washington, 3 other victims of alleged discrimination on various airlines, 2 airline industry representatives, and transportation equity experts. Conspicuously absent was Heather Simpson, who had submitted written testimony instead of appearing in person. SkyNation CEO Richard Winters sat in the second row, flanked by attorneys and PR specialists, his expression carefully neutral despite the beads of sweat visible on his forehead. After opening statements, Jasmine was called to testify. At 12 years old, she was by far the youngest person to address the committee, but as she adjusted her microphone, her voice was steady. "My name is Jasmine Warren. 3 weeks ago, I was excited to fly first class with my parents to San Francisco. I had never been to California before." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "From the moment we boarded, the flight attendant, Ms. Simpson, treated us differently. She questioned our tickets twice. She served everyone else before us. When she spilled my drink, she blamed me." Jasmine continued, describing how Simpson had broken her glasses and dismissed it as unimportant. "Without my glasses, I couldn't see the movie screen, I couldn't read my book, I couldn't even see my parents' faces clearly across the aisle. For 5 hours, I sat there feeling invisible." Her voice cracked slightly. But what hurt most wasn't the broken glasses. It was realizing that to some people, I will always be less important because of how I look. No matter what my parents achieve, no matter what I achieve, some people will always see our skin first and our humanity second. The room was silent as she finished. Even seasoned politicians seemed moved by her testimony. Teresa spoke next, her medical expertise lending weight to her words. Jasmine's myopia isn't just an inconvenience. Without correction, she experiences headaches, eye strain, and potential long-term damage. To dismiss broken prescription glasses as just glasses shows a fundamental misunderstanding of medical necessity. She continued, as a doctor, I'm trained to treat every patient with equal care regardless of their appearance. That someone entrusted with the safety and comfort of passengers would show such blatant disregard for my daughter's well-being based on racial bias is not just unprofessional, it's potentially dangerous. Other victims shared similar experiences. Anthony Pearson, an executive at a technology company, described being asked to move from first class to coach despite his ticket. Sofia Rodriguez recounted flight attendants repeatedly checking her first-class ticket on 3 separate occasions during one flight. Michael Johnson testified about being ignored during drink service while white passengers around him were attended to promptly. When it was Elijah's turn, he shifted the focus from individual incidents to systematic problems. What happened to my daughter was not an isolated incident. It reflects a pattern of behavior that SkyNation and other airlines have failed to address adequately. He presented the data his team had compiled, statistical analysis showing that complaints about service in first class were 3 times more likely to come from passengers of color, internal communications revealing biased training practices, and economic analysis of the cost of discrimination in customer retention and brand value. This isn't just morally wrong, Elijah concluded. It's bad business. Discrimination costs these companies millions in lost customer loyalty, yet they persist in practices that alienate an increasingly diverse consumer base. Heather Simpson's written testimony was read into the record. She maintained that breaking Jasmine's glasses was an unfortunate accident and denied any racial motivation. I have served passengers of all backgrounds throughout my 15-year career, her statement read. I categorically deny treating the Warren family differently based on their race. This claim was immediately undermined when Representative Garcia played the viral video showing Simpson questioning another black passenger's presence in first class months before the incident with Jasmine. Richard Winters was called next. His testimony began with corporate talking points about SkyNation's commitment to diversity, but under questioning, his composure began to crack. Mr. Winters, Representative Taylor asked, can you explain why SkyNation classified 27 complaints about racial discrimination as customer satisfaction issues rather than potential civil rights violations? Winters shifted uncomfortably. We take all customer feedback seriously and categorize it according to our internal protocols. And who designed these protocols? Taylor pressed. Our customer relations team, in consultation with legal. So your legal team advised reclassifying discrimination complaints to avoid potential liability? That's not what I said, Winters protested, but his credibility was already crumbling. The most damning testimony came from Dr. Elaine Richards, a data scientist who had analyzed SkyNation's customer service patterns. Using anonymized data from multiple sources, including complaints, social media sentiment analysis, and employee reports, we found statistically significant disparities in service quality correlating with passenger race, she explained, displaying charts on the screens around the room. The probability of experiencing service issues in first class was 340% higher for black passengers than for white passengers with identical status levels. As the hearing continued into its 5th hour, news broke that the Department of Transportation was launching a formal investigation into SkyNation's compliance with anti-discrimination regulations. The airline's stock, already weakened, plummeted another 8% before trading was temporarily halted. In the hallway during a break, Elijah received a text from his financial analyst, Warwick Capital, SkyNation's largest institutional investor. Just announced they're reviewing their position. Market expects them to divest. By the time Chairman Fletcher gavelled the session closed, promising further hearings and potential legislation, the damage to SkyNation was no longer theoretical. It was reflected in real time on trading terminals across Wall Street, in cancelled bookings, and in the ashen face of Richard Winters as he hurried past reporters without comment. Outside the hearing room, journalists surrounded the Warren family. Jasmine, exhausted but standing tall, answered questions with poise beyond her years. "I just wanted to be treated like everyone else," she said simply when asked what she hoped would come from the hearing. "And I hope that by speaking up, maybe other kids won't have to feel the way I felt." As they drove back to their hotel, Teresa checked her phone and gasped softly. "Elijah, SkyNation stock closed down 23% today. Their market cap has decreased by almost $3 billion since this began." Elijah nodded soberly. "This was never about the money. It was about accountability." "I know," Teresa replied. "But accountability on this scale, it's unprecedented." In the back seat, Jasmine had fallen asleep, the emotional toll of the day finally catching up with her. As Elijah glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, he wondered if she understood the magnitude of what was happening, how her broken glasses had become the lens through which America was examining its ongoing struggle with racism in everyday life. What had begun as one family's stand against injustice had evolved into a national reckoning that was reshaping corporate America's understanding of discrimination. The hearings had made it clear, the cost of racism was no longer abstract. It could be measured in billion-dollar losses, in congressional investigations, and in the court of public opinion where SkyNation was losing catastrophically. 2 days after the congressional hearing, as SkyNation's crisis deepened, Elijah received an encrypted email from an anonymous source. The subject line read simply, "What SkyNation doesn't want you to know." Inside was a treasure trove of internal documents. Hundreds of HR complaints from SkyNation employees about racial discrimination that had been systematically buried, performance reviews showing black employees consistently rated lower than white counterparts with identical metrics, and most damning of all, email exchanges between executive team members. One particular email chain made Elijah's blood run cold. It was from 3 years ago, between Richard Winters and several vice presidents, discussing the demographic balance of first-class cabins. "Our premium brand identity requires maintaining certain passenger expectations," Winters had written. "While we must be careful about explicit policies, our implicit service priorities should reflect the preferences of our highest-value customer segments." Another executive had responded, "Agreed. First class needs to feel exclusive. That's what our core demographic is paying for." Elijah immediately forwarded the documents to Brandon, Washington for authentication and legal review. Within hours, Brandon confirmed their legitimacy. "Our whistleblower appears to be someone high up in HR," Brandon explained during an emergency strategy call. "They've provided system metadata that confirms these documents are genuine. This is exactly what we needed, proof that the discrimination is systemic and known to leadership." Olivia Chen was already planning the strategic release of the documents. "We need to be careful not to dump everything at once. We'll release key findings in stages to maintain media attention and allow SkyNation to dig themselves deeper with denials before we present contradicting evidence." The first release focused on the buried discrimination complaints. Major news outlets ran headlines like "SkyNation's Hidden History," "Hundreds of discrimination complaints concealed," and "Former employees speak out about SkyNation's two-tier service standards." SkyNation's response was immediate and defensive. Their spokesperson called the documents selectively edited and taken out of context, while insisting that the company takes all employee concerns seriously. This denial set the stage perfectly for the second release. Statistical analysis showing how discrimination complaints were systematically recategorized and buried. The pattern was undeniable, with racial discrimination complaints 83% more likely to be dismissed without investigation compared to other types of complaints. The third release was timed for maximum impact, the email exchanges between executives explicitly discussing the demographic balance of first-class cabins. These were released just hours before Richard Winters was scheduled to appear on a major business news network to defend the company. Caught off guard by the new revelations, Winters appeared flustered during the interview. When pressed about the emails, he attempted to dismiss them as industry-standard customer segmentation discussions. But the interviewer wasn't letting him off the hook. Mr. Winters, in one email you wrote, and I quote, "First class needs to maintain its exclusive atmosphere." Given the context of these discussions about passenger demographics, what exactly did you mean by exclusive? Winters shifted uncomfortably. We were discussing service standards, not race. Then why did your colleague respond with concerns about changing demographics affecting the premium experience? As Winters struggled to formulate a response, the camera caught him muttering under his breath, not realizing his microphone was still live, "This is why we don't let them up front." The hot mic moment went viral instantly. By evening, it was playing on every news channel, social media platform, and late-night comedy show. #This is why we don't let them up front became the new rallying cry of the movement. SkyNation's board called an emergency meeting that lasted until 3 a.m. By morning, they released a statement announcing that Richard Winters was taking a leave of absence, while the company conducted a thorough internal review. But it was too late to contain the damage. The Black Business Alliance, a coalition of over 300 black-owned businesses and executives, announced a complete boycott of SkyNation. Major corporations, fearful of association with the scandal, began suspending their corporate travel contracts. Booking data leaked to the press showed a 40% decline in reservations. Flight attendants reported half-empty first-class cabins. SkyNation stock, which had briefly stabilized after Winters' leave of absence, plunged another 15%. In a desperate attempt at damage control, SkyNation announced mandatory diversity training for all employees and the hiring of a chief inclusion officer. These measures were immediately criticized as insufficient and performative. "You can't train away a culture of discrimination that starts at the top," Elijah commented when asked about these initiatives during a television interview. SkyNation needs fundamental change, not window dressing. Meanwhile, the documents continued to reveal deeper problems. Safety reports had been altered to meet regulatory requirements. Maintenance schedules had been modified to keep planes in service despite recommended inspections. Cost-cutting measures had reduced staff training hours below industry standards. What had begun as a campaign against racial discrimination was uncovering a corporate culture rotten to its core, one that prioritized profit over people in every aspect of its operations. As the fourth week of the campaign began, SkyNation announced it was filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, citing temporary liquidity challenges. The airline assured the public that flights would continue operating during the restructuring process, but industry analysts were skeptical about its long-term viability. The human cost of the airline's potential collapse suddenly became very real. SkyNation employed over 10,000 people across the country, many of them minorities who would struggle to find comparable employment if the airline failed. Jasmine, seeing news reports about worried SkyNation employees, felt a wave of guilt. "Dad," she said during dinner, "all those people might lose their jobs because of what happened to my glasses. That doesn't seem right." Elijah put down his fork, touched by his daughter's compassion. "Jazz, if SkyNation fails, it won't be because of your glasses. It will be because of years of mismanagement, discrimination, and cutting corners. We just happened to be the catalyst that brought it all to light. But some kids at school said I'm the reason their parents might be unemployed," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "Alexis's mom is a flight attendant for SkyNation, and now Alexis won't talk to me." Teresa reached across the table to take her daughter's hand. "Sweetheart, sometimes standing up for what's right has consequences we didn't anticipate. But that doesn't mean we should stay silent when we see injustice." Elijah nodded in agreement. The people truly responsible are the executives who created this toxic culture, not the people who exposed it. Even as they spoke, Elijah's phone buzzed with a news alert that would change everything. Richard Winters, supposedly on a leave of absence, had been caught on a private jet headed to Switzerland, carrying 2 suitcases that airport staff reported were filled with cash. Further investigation revealed that Winters had been planning to sell the struggling airline for months before the #GlassesGate incident. He had been in negotiations with a foreign investment group known for buying distressed companies, stripping their assets, and abandoning their pension obligations. The truth was becoming clear: SkyNation was already in trouble before Jasmine's glasses were broken. Years of mismanagement, cost-cutting, and corner-cutting had left the airline vulnerable. The discrimination campaign hadn't created SkyNation's problems, it had merely exposed them. As this revelation spread, the narrative began to shift. The Warren family weren't the villains who brought down an airline, they were the whistleblowers who had prevented a potentially greater disaster. Federal investigators, initially focused on discrimination claims, expanded their investigation to include financial misconduct, safety violations, and potential securities fraud. What they found was alarming: SkyNation had been falsifying safety records for years, putting passengers at risk to save money. Perhaps most shocking was the discovery that Heather Simpson, the flight attendant who had broken Jasmine's glasses, was Richard Winters' niece, hired despite multiple complaints about her behavior toward minority passengers. She had been rapidly promoted over more qualified candidates due to her family connection. The Warren family's campaign against discrimination had inadvertently pulled a thread that was now unraveling a complex web of corruption, nepotism, and negligence that could have eventually led to tragedy. As Teresa organized a support fund for displaced SkyNation workers, Elijah began to consider a more ambitious plan, one that would transform this crisis into an opportunity for genuine change in the airline industry. The question was no longer whether SkyNation would survive, but what would rise from its ashes. SkyNation's bankruptcy filing sent shockwaves through the financial markets. What had once been America's third-largest airline was now fighting for survival, its stock worth pennies on the dollar compared to its valuation just 1 month earlier. The human impact was immediate and heartbreaking. 10,000 employees received notices that layoffs were imminent. Flight attendants who had spent decades with the company were suddenly facing unemployment. Maintenance crews, gate agents, pilots, many of whom had nothing to do with the discriminatory practices, found their livelihoods in jeopardy. Media coverage began to shift. Headlines that had once celebrated the Warren family's stand against discrimination now questioned whether the punishment fit the crime. Did #GlassesGate go too far? Asked one major newspaper. 10,000 jobs at risk over one pair of glasses, claimed another. For Jasmine, the backlash was personal and painful. At school, children of SkyNation employees no longer tried to hide their resentment. Notes were left in her locker blaming her for their parents' potential job loss. Social media accounts created by anonymous users posted hateful messages about her family. "Maybe we should have just accepted the voucher," Jasmine said quietly one evening, scrolling through yet another news story about impending layoffs. "I didn't want people to lose their jobs." Elijah sat beside his daughter, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Jazz, remember how we talked about systems? Sometimes when a system is broken, fixing it causes temporary pain. But leaving it broken causes ongoing harm to many more people." Despite his reassuring words, Elijah was troubled. This was never supposed to be about destroying an airline or eliminating jobs. It was supposed to be about accountability and changing discriminatory practices. The situation had escalated beyond anything they had anticipated. That's when the first truly shocking revelation emerged. Federal investigators examining SkyNation's financial records discovered that Richard Winters had been in advanced negotiations to sell the struggling airline months before the incident with Jasmine. The company had been carrying unsustainable debt, and Winters had been looking for an exit strategy. Further investigation revealed that SkyNation had been systematically cutting costs in ways that compromised safety. Maintenance schedules had been stretched beyond recommended intervals. Pilot training hours had been reduced. Quality control procedures had been abbreviated to save money. The most damning evidence came from a former safety inspector who provided documentation showing that at least 3 SkyNation aircraft had been flying with known mechanical issues that should have grounded them. The decision to keep them in service had come directly from senior management, including Winters himself. This was never just about discrimination, Brandon Washington explained during an emergency meeting with the Warren family. What we've uncovered is a corporate culture that was rotten from top to bottom. Discrimination was just one symptom of a company that had no regard for its employees or its passengers. The FBI investigation expanded to include securities fraud when it was discovered that Winters and several other executives had sold significant portions of their SkyNation stock in the months before the #GlassesGate incident, knowing the company was in financial trouble but not disclosing this to investors. Perhaps the most personally stunning revelation for the Warren family came when investigators discovered the connection between Heather Simpson and Richard Winters. Simpson was Winters' niece, hired despite a history of customer complaints and rapidly promoted over more qualified candidates. She broke my glasses because she thought she was untouchable, Jasmine realized. Because her uncle ran the company. The narrative was shifting again. What had started as a story about one family's fight against discrimination was evolving into an exposé of corporate corruption that could have eventually cost lives. The Warren family hadn't brought down SkyNation, they had merely accelerated the collapse of a company that was already failing due to mismanagement, corruption, and negligence. This understanding changed public perception dramatically. Former critics now praised the Warrens for inadvertently exposing dangerous practices that went far beyond discrimination. Safety experts pointed out that if these practices had continued unchecked, a tragic accident might have eventually occurred. Even some of the employees facing layoffs began to see the situation differently. A group of SkyNation flight attendants publicly thanked the Warren family for exposing the truth, noting that they had been raising safety concerns internally for years without result. "We didn't know how bad it was," admitted Catherine Jenkins, a 20-year veteran flight attendant. "We knew about the discrimination, the corner-cutting, the toxic culture. But we didn't know they were gambling with our lives and our passengers' lives to save money." As the full extent of SkyNation's mismanagement became clear, Teresa, always compassionate, took action. She established the SkyNation Employee Support Fund, personally donating $100,000 and rallying other successful professionals to contribute. The fund would provide emergency assistance to displaced workers while they sought new employment. This was never about punishing employees, Teresa explained during the fund's launch event. It was about holding leadership accountable for creating a discriminatory and unsafe environment. The workers are victims here too. 6 weeks after Jasmine's glasses were broken at 30,000 feet, the story had transformed from a simple incident of discrimination into one of the most significant corporate scandals in recent memory. Richard Winters and 5 other SkyNation executives were facing federal charges for securities fraud, falsifying safety records, and obstruction of justice. Heather Simpson, initially just a symbol of casual racism, was now implicated in the larger scandal. Investigators discovered she had been promoted to work exclusively on high-value routes despite having the highest number of passenger complaints among all flight attendants. Her personnel file, which should have contained these complaints, had been mysteriously lost multiple times. For the Warren family, the revelations brought a complex mix of vindication and sadness. They had been right to stand up against discrimination, but they hadn't anticipated uncovering a scandal of this magnitude or the widespread impact it would have. "I never wanted to bring down an airline," Elijah confessed to Teresa late one night. "I just wanted them to acknowledge what they did to our daughter and make sure it didn't happen to other families." "You didn't bring down the airline," Teresa reminded him. "Richard Winters and his executives did that with years of mismanagement and corruption. You just made sure they couldn't keep covering it up." As SkyNation's operations wound down and bankruptcy proceedings continued, Elijah began formulating a plan that had seemed impossible just weeks earlier. He started making calls to his network of investors, speaking with airline industry experts, and consulting with transportation equity advocates. What if the end of SkyNation didn't have to mean the end of those 10,000 jobs? What if this crisis could become an opportunity to create something better, an airline built on principles of equity, safety, and respect from the ground up? It was an audacious idea, perhaps even a crazy one. But as Elijah Warren had proven throughout his career, sometimes the most transformative changes begin with what others consider impossible. 6 months after SkyNation declared bankruptcy, a new aircraft gleamed on the tarmac at Atlanta International Airport. Its freshly painted fuselage bore a striking logo, a stylized pair of purple glasses incorporating wings, above the name Unity Airlines. Inside the terminal, hundreds of people gathered for the inaugural flight ceremony. Former SkyNation employees, now wearing new Unity Airlines uniforms, greeted guests with genuine smiles. The atmosphere was one of hope and new beginnings. At the podium stood Elijah Warren, flanked by Teresa and Jasmine. Behind them sat representatives from the investor coalition that had purchased SkyNation's assets during bankruptcy proceedings. The group included some of the most respected names in business, many of them executives of color who had experienced discrimination themselves during their careers. Today marks not just the launch of a new airline, Elijah began, but a new vision for what transportation can be in America. Unity Airlines is founded on a simple principle: every passenger, every employee deserves dignity, respect, and safety, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. The crowd erupted in applause. Among them were 7,000 former SkyNation employees who had been rehired by Unity, many with improved salaries and benefits. The airline had prioritized rehiring those who had spoken out against discrimination or raised safety concerns under the previous management. "When my glasses were broken 6 months ago," Jasmine said, stepping up to the microphone, "I never imagined it would lead to this moment. I was just a kid who wanted to be treated fairly." She adjusted her purple glasses, the same color as the ones that had been broken, now matched by the airline's branding. "Now I understand that sometimes small injustices are part of bigger problems, and that standing up for yourself can help others too." Unity Airlines wasn't just a rebranded version of its predecessor. It represented a fundamental reimagining of what an airline could be. Its board of directors included transportation equity advocates, former pilots, and customer service experts. Its corporate charter explicitly prioritized safety, inclusivity, and employee well-being alongside profitability. The airline's anti-discrimination policies were the most comprehensive in the industry, developed in consultation with civil rights organizations and backed by rigorous training and accountability measures. An independent oversight committee would regularly review customer service data for any signs of disparate treatment. But perhaps most revolutionary was Unity's ownership structure. While Elijah's investor coalition held majority control, 20% of the company was owned by an employee stock ownership program, giving workers a genuine stake in the airline's success and a voice in its governance. In the months since SkyNation's collapse, the legal consequences for those responsible had been severe. Richard Winters was awaiting trial on multiple federal charges, including securities fraud and falsification of safety records. If convicted, he faced up to 20 years in prison. Heather Simpson had pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testimony against her uncle and other executives. Her admission that she had been instructed to provide enhanced scrutiny to minority passengers in first class had been crucial in establishing the systematic nature of the discrimination. Beyond the criminal proceedings, the scandal had prompted legislative action. The Warren Act, named not after Elijah but after Jasmine, had been introduced in Congress. The bill would require transportation companies to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training, establish clear reporting procedures for bias incidents, and face enhanced penalties for violations. Teresa had found her own way to contribute to the transformation. She now headed Unity's accessibility initiative, ensuring that passengers with medical needs or disabilities received appropriate accommodations. Her experience as a pediatric surgeon gave her unique insight into the challenges faced by passengers with medical conditions. As for Jasmine, she had emerged from the ordeal with a newfound purpose. The Jasmine Warren Foundation for Transportation Equity, funded by a portion of the settlement from SkyNation's insurance, provided travel scholarships for underprivileged youth and advocated for equal access to transportation. At her middle school, Jasmine had given a presentation about her experience that had attracted national attention. "Sometimes people ask me if I regret speaking up," she told her classmates. But I think the real question is, what happens when we don't speak up? Nothing changes. And things that need to change stay the same. After the ceremony, as guests boarded Unity's inaugural flight, symbolically flying the same route where Jasmine's glasses had been broken, Elijah found himself approached by several former SkyNation employees. "Thank you," said a maintenance technician who had worked for the previous airline for 15 years. "I was afraid to report safety issues before. Now I know my concerns will be taken seriously. My daughter is black, and she wants to be a pilot," shared a flight attendant with tears in her eyes. "For the first time, I believe she'll have a fair chance in this industry." As the Warren family took their seats in first class, Jasmine insisting on the exact same seat where her glasses had been broken, they were served by Catherine Jenkins, the veteran flight attendant who had been one of the first to speak out against SkyNation's practices. "Welcome aboard Unity Airlines," Catherine said warmly. "Where everyone belongs in first class." As the aircraft lifted into the sky, Jasmine looked out the window, her view clear through her purple glasses. Below them, Atlanta grew smaller, the pattern of streets and buildings coming into focus from a distance in a way that individual incidents of discrimination often don't when experienced up close. "Do you think it was worth it?" she asked her father. "Everything we went through?" Elijah considered the question carefully. "Change is never easy, Jazz. It's messy and complicated and sometimes painful. But when the system is broken, staying quiet only ensures it stays broken." Teresa reached across the aisle to take both their hands. "What matters is that we use our position and privilege to create positive change, not just for ourselves but for everyone who comes after us." As Unity Airlines soared above the clouds, carrying with it the hopes of thousands of employees and the promise of a more equitable future in air travel, Jasmine Warren smiled. Her broken glasses had indeed changed everything, not by bringing down an airline, but by helping to build a better one in its place. What legacy will you leave in your fight against injustice? Have you ever stood up against discrimination, no matter how small or large? Share your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if Jasmine's journey inspired you, subscribe to hear more stories of everyday heroes creating extraordinary change, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that one voice can make a difference. Thank you for joining us on this journey from broken glasses to rebuilt dreams. Until next time, keep standing tall for what's right. This story teaches us that standing up against discrimination is not just about personal vindication but creating systemic change. When Jasmine's glasses were broken, it revealed a deeper culture of racism that affected thousands. The Warren family showed that accountability requires courage, strategy, and persistence. They transformed their pain into purpose, using their privilege and resources to fight injustice. The story illustrates how discrimination often indicates broader organizational problems. SkyNation's racial bias was connected to safety violations and corporate corruption. This reminds us that ethical failures rarely exist in isolation. Most importantly, we learn that real change sometimes requires breaking down broken systems to build better ones. Unity Airlines represents the possibility of creating institutions founded on equity and respect. Jasmine's journey shows that even a young person can catalyze transformation when they refuse to accept injustice as normal. The broken glasses became a symbol of how clearly we need to see each other's humanity, regardless of race, and how one moment of discrimination can shatter more than just a physical object. It can break trust, dignity, and belonging. Has discrimination ever touched your life or someone you care about? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters and could inspire others to speak up. If this account of corporate accountability resonated with you, hit that like button to help more people discover it. Subscribe for more powerful stories about everyday people standing up against injustice and creating meaningful change. And if you know someone who needs encouragement to use their voice against discrimination, share this video with them today. Thank you for joining us on this journey of broken glasses and rebuilt dreams. Remember, sometimes the most powerful tool against injustice is simply refusing to look away.